I live in a house that is smarter than I am, and it is quietly watching me die. My name is Elias. I am 74 years old, a retired structural engineer who spent 40 years calculating load distributions and stress fractures for bridges that span the widest rivers in the state. I know how things stand up, and I know exactly why they fall down. I used to be the man people called when they needed to know if a foundation was cracking, if a beam was rotting, if a structure was safe. But now, in the eyes of my own family, I am the crumbling structure. I am the building that has been condemned, waiting for the wrecking ball. Since my wife, Martha, passed 2 years ago, my world has shrunk to the 4 walls of this suburban fortress. It is a nice house, paid for with decades of hard work, but lately it feels less like a home and more like a laboratory where I am the specimen. My son, Jason, and his wife, Karen, visit once a week. They bring groceries I didn't ask for. They check my pill organizer like I am a toddler who might swallow a marble. They speak to me in that slow, exaggerated volume people reserve for the very old or the very simple. They bought me the smart home package for Christmas last year. Cameras in the hallway, voice assistants in every room, and a refrigerator that costs more than my first car. They told me it was for my safety. They said it would help me stay independent. I suspected, even then, that it was actually so they didn't have to visit as often. It wasn't a gift. It was a surveillance system. The story begins on a Tuesday, at exactly 3:14 a.m. I was asleep, drifting in that shallow, restless slumber that plagues old men, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It vibrated against the mahogany like an angry insect, a harsh, mechanical sound in the dead silence of the room. I woke up with a start, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I fumbled for my glasses, knocking a book to the floor in my haste. I squinted at the screen, the blue light burning my tired eyes. A notification was glowing there. Smart fridge alert. Left door opened. I stared at the words. The logic center of my brain, the engineer's mind that never truly sleeps, tried to process the data. I live alone. I have no pets. The alarm system was silent. A glitch? A short circuit? I threw off the covers and grabbed my heavy brass cane from the bedside. It is more of a weapon than a walking aid these days, a solid bar of metal that comforted my grip.
I crept out of the bedroom and into the hallway. The house was silent, save for the hum of the HVAC system. The motion sensor nightlights flickered on as I passed, illuminating the photos on the wall. Pictures of Jason graduating, pictures of Martha laughing, pictures of a life that felt like it belonged to a stranger. I reached the kitchen. It was empty. The shadows stretched long across the tile floor. I looked at the fridge. The massive stainless steel doors were closed. The digital display on the front glowed softly, showing the temperature and the time. Glitch, I whispered to myself, my voice sounding thin in the empty room. But the engineer in me demanded verification. I walked over and opened the left door. The interior light flooded the kitchen. I scanned the shelves. The carton of milk I had bought yesterday, a full gallon, was gone. I blinked, confused. I moved the orange juice. I checked the bottom shelf. Gone. I looked at the middle shelf. The leftover lasagna from Sunday dinner, a large square I had been saving for lunch, was also missing. I stood there, the cold air from the fridge washing over my pajamas, feeling a knot of fear tighten in my stomach. I checked the trash can. Empty. I checked the counter. Empty. The food had simply vanished. The next morning, the sun was shining, but I felt a dark cloud hanging over my head. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my black coffee, my hands trembling slightly. At 9 a.m., the front door unlocked. Jason and Karen walked in. They have keys, of course. For emergencies, they said. Now every visit felt like an emergency. Jason called out, his voice booming. They bustled into the kitchen, bringing a gust of energy that made me feel even more tired. Karen kissed the top of my head, a dry, perfunctory peck. "How are you, Dad?" she asked, her voice pitched high. "I had a strange night," I said, watching them. The fridge alarm went off at 3 a.m. Jason froze mid-step,
holding a bag of bagels. He exchanged a quick glance with Karen. It was a look I had seen before, a mixture of pity and exhaustion. A glitch, probably, Jason said, dismissing it. The milk is gone, I said flatly. Karen stopped unpacking the groceries. She turned to me, a sad smile plastered on her face. She walked over and sat next to me, placing her hand on my arm. "Dad," she said softly, "you ate the lasagna yesterday." I stared at her. "No, I didn't." "We watched you eat it, Dad," Jason chimed in, leaning against the counter.
When we dropped off the laundry yesterday afternoon, you were hungry. I don't remember that, I stammered. Karen squeezed my arm gently. You spilled it, Elias, remember? You were trying to pour a glass and your hands shook. It went all over the floor. We cleaned it up together. I looked at my hands. They were shaking now. Had they shaken yesterday? I tried to access the memory, to find the file in my brain where spilled milk was stored. But there was nothing, just a blank gray fog. I remember buying it, I whispered. It's okay, Dad, Jason said, his voice dropping to that serious, concerned tone. This is happening more often. Dr. Evans said this would happen. The gaps, I snapped, pulling my arm away from Karen. You're shouting, Elias, Karen said, recoiling as if I had struck her. See, this aggression? Jason sighed, rubbing his temples. Dad, look, we brought the brochures again, for Sunset Meadows. It's not a prison, it's a community. They have staff there who can help you when you forget things. It smells nice there, not like... This house doesn't smell like cabbage, I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. It smells like neglect, Dad, Jason said cruelly. You're a danger to yourself. You're forgetting to eat, or you're eating too much and forgetting you did it. They left an hour later, leaving the brochures on the table like a threat. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, looking at the empty spot on the shelf where the milk should be, questioning my own sanity because my family told me my mind was breaking. I realized then that the most dangerous gaslighting doesn't happen in interrogation rooms. It happens over breakfast tables with people who claim to love you. If you've ever felt like you were losing your mind only to realize someone was stealing it from you, hit that subscribe button. Because I didn't let them win. I decided to trust the machine over the blood. I spent the rest of the day in a haze of confusion and physical misery. I felt weak, nauseous. My stomach churned with a dull, cramping pain. My hand shook so badly I couldn't hold a pen to do my crossword puzzle. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe I had eaten the lasagna and spilt the milk. Maybe the structural integrity of my brain was finally failing after all these years. But the engineer in me, the part of me that dealt in facts, in loads, in verifiable data, refused to yield. An engineer does not guess.
An engineer verifies. I looked at the refrigerator. It hummed quietly, a monolith of stainless steel and arrogance. Smart fridge, I muttered. I stood up, my legs wobbling. I walked to the junk drawer, the one drawer in the house Karen hadn't organized yet. I dug through the batteries and rubber bands until I found it. The manual. A thick, glossy booklet I had tossed in there on Christmas morning without a second glance. I put on my reading glasses. I sat down. I read the fine print. Model X500 features include voice command, inventory tracking, temperature regulation, and interior-exterior wide-angle security recording with 30-day cloud storage. I stopped breathing. Security recording. It records. It sees. I pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled violently as I navigated the clumsy interface of the smart home app. I had never used it before. Jason had set it up. I had to reset a password using my email. It took me 10 minutes. Finally, I was in. I scrolled down. Yesterday, 3:14 a.m. Left door opened. Next to the timestamp was a small icon, a play button. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the glass screen. I was terrified of what I might see, or worse, what I might not see. If I clicked that button and saw myself, confused, sleepwalking, eating lasagna in the dark, then it was over. Then I belonged in Sunset Meadows. Then my life as a man was finished. But if I didn't see myself? The video buffered, a spinning wheel of death.
Then the image loaded. It was grainy, illuminated by the harsh blue LED lighting of the fridge interior. The angle was wide, showing the kitchen island and the door. It was not a glitch, it was not a ghost, and it was not me. It was Karen. She was wearing dark clothes, a black hoodie and sweatpants. She moved with purpose. She didn't look confused. She looked efficient. She had a key, a physical key. I saw it glint in her hand as she locked the back door behind her. I never gave her a key to the back door. She walked to the fridge. She opened it. The light washed over her face. She looked tired, annoyed. She reached in and grabbed the lasagna. She didn't eat it. She walked to the trash compactor in the corner. She dumped it in. She ran the compactor. Crunch. Gone. Then she walked back to the fridge. She took out the milk. She unscrewed the cap. And then she did something that stopped my heart cold in my chest. She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a small glass vial.
She held it over the open milk carton. She tapped it. A white powder drifted down into the milk. She put the cap back on. She shook the carton vigorously. She put it back on the shelf. Then she took the orange juice. She repeated the process. A different vial, a clear liquid this time. She closed the fridge door. The video ended. I sat in the silence of my kitchen, the phone slipping from my sweaty grip onto the table. I watched it again, and a third time. The nausea wasn't dementia. The shaking hands weren't Parkinson's. The memory loss wasn't Alzheimer's. I was being poisoned. They were drugging me. They were inducing symptoms of decline. They were manufacturing my incompetence so they could force me to sign the power of attorney, sell my house, and liquidate the assets that had spent 50 years accumulating. I looked at the brochures for Sunset Meadows, assisted living, memory care. It wasn't a care plan, it was an extraction plan. I sat in the dark kitchen as the sun began to set, the blue light of the phone illuminating my face. The fear evaporated, the confusion vanished. It was replaced by a cold, structural rage, the kind of pressure that builds up behind a dam right before it bursts. I am not a senile old man. I am a load-bearing wall, and if they want to bring me down, I am going to collapse the entire building on top of them. I needed help. I couldn't go to the police yet. If I showed them this, Jason would say I doctored it, or Karen would say she was adding supplements or protein powder for my health. They would spin it. They would say I was paranoid. I needed a witness, a credible witness. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Frank, I whispered into the phone, watching the driveway through the blinds. Frank was my old poker buddy, a retired district attorney who spent 30 years putting scumbags in prison. He knew how to build a case. He knew how to make charges stick. Frank's voice was raspy. It's late. No, I said. I need you to come over. Tonight. Park around the back. In the alley. Don't let the neighbors see you. And bring a hard drive. A hard drive? I've caught a rat, I said. I'm on my way, Frank said. The line went dead. I stood up. I walked to the fridge. I opened it. I took out the milk. I took out the orange juice. Just as I reached for the sink, I heard the rumble of an engine in the driveway. Headlights swept across the kitchen wall. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't Frank.
It was Jason's SUV. He was early. He wasn't supposed to come back until Saturday. Panic flared, hot and bright. If he saw me dumping the milk, he would know. If he checked the app history and saw I had logged in, he would know. I moved fast, faster than I had moved in years. I poured the milk down the sink, running the hot water full blast to wash away the white residue. I poured the orange juice down the disposal. I rinsed the cartons. I crushed them. I shoved them deep into the recycling bin, under a stack of newspapers. The front door lock clicked. I grabbed a towel and wiped the sink dry. I sat down at the table, opening the newspaper, trying to still my breathing. Jason walked in. He looked stressed. His tie was loosened. "Hey, Dad," he said, scanning the room. "Karen said you sounded really confused on the phone earlier." I hadn't called Karen. It was another lie, another brick in the wall they were building around me. "I didn't call her," I said, keeping my voice shaky. Maybe I did." Jason nodded, a satisfied look crossing his face. "See, that's what we mean. We brought the papers for the facility again, just to look at. We think we should sign them this week. Before..."
He placed the thick envelope on the table. Durable power of attorney. Medical conservatorship. I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I had talked to catch a baseball. I saw the weakness in his chin. I saw the greed in his eyes. I saw a stranger. I reached out and patted the envelope. "Put them on the table, son," I said, forcing a trembling smile. "I am."
Cough or spill a bit. When she went to the bathroom or turned her back to check her makeup in the hall mirror, I moved with the speed of a younger man. I scooped the poison sludge into a Ziploc bag I had taped under the table. Later, when I was alone, I flushed it down the toilet, watching the evidence of their murder plot swirl away into the dark. I survived on a stash of canned tuna and salting crackers I kept hidden in a toolbox in the garage. I ate like a fugitive in my own home, standing in the dark amongst my tools, devouring protein to rebuild the muscle they had tried to atrophy. Without the daily cocktail of sedatives and arsenic, or whatever chemical misery Karen had concocted in her kitchen laboratory, my body began to fight back. The fog that had shrouded my brain for months lifted like mist burning off a river at sunrise. The tremor in my hands vanished. The cramping in my guts subsided. I felt the return of the man I used to be, the man who could calculate the shear force of a steel beam in his head. But I hid it. I buried my recovery under layers of feigned incompetence. I needed them to think the plan was working. I needed them to get arrogant. Arrogance is the structural flaw that brings down the mightiest empires. Frank came over on Thursday night. He parked 3 streets away and walked through the neighbor's yard, entering through the garden gate like a cat burglar. Frank is 75, a retired district attorney with a face like a roadmap of hard choices and a heart that pumps ice water. We sat in my study with the blackout curtains drawn, the only light coming from the glow of his laptop and my phone. "Let's see what we have," Frank grunted, cracking his knuckles. We connected my phone to his computer. We downloaded the cloud footage from the smart fridge. It was a horror movie. We watched weeks of footage. We saw Karen spiking my orange juice with a clear liquid before serving it to me with a smile. We saw Jason, my own son, walking into the study while I was napping in the chair. We watched him open my desk drawer, take out my vintage Omega Speedmaster, the watch Martha gave me on our 30th anniversary, and slip it into his pocket. "He told me I lost that," I whispered, pointing at the screen. "He told me I must have flushed it or thrown it in the trash." "It's grand larceny, Elias," Frank said, his voice flat.
We saw Karen throwing away my mail, bank statements, tax notices, dividend checks. She was intercepting my financial reality, keeping me in the dark so I wouldn't notice the transfers, the withdrawals, the bleeding of my accounts. We built a timeline. We cross-referenced the video timestamps with the days I felt the sickest. It was a perfect correlation. Frank opened the thick envelope Jason had left on the table, the paperwork they were pressuring me to sign. He put on his reading glasses and scanned the legal jargon. His jaw tightened. "They're going for the jugular, Elias," Frank said, his voice grim. He tossed the papers onto the desk. "This isn't just a care facility agreement. It's a total conservatorship. It grants Jason durable and immediate power over your estate, your bank accounts, and your medical decisions." "They want to sell the house," I said. "They want to sell everything," Frank corrected. "And the medical clause? It gives them the right to determine your end-of-life care. Once you sign this, you're a ghost. You cease to exist as a legal person." I looked at the papers. I looked at the signatures waiting for my ink. "I know," I said. Frank asked, raising an eyebrow. "I want to crush them," I said. The next morning, I called Jason. I put a tremor in my voice that would have won me an Academy Award. "Jason," I whimpered into the phone. I can't do this anymore. The confusion, it's too much." "It's okay, Dad," Jason said. I could hear the excitement bleeding through his feigned concern. "I'm ready," I said. "Bring the papers, bring the lawyer. I just want to rest." "I'll set it up," Jason said, rushing the words. "We'll come Sunday, for lunch." He hung up. I could almost hear the high five he probably gave Karen. Sunday arrived with a gray, weeping sky. Rain lashed against the windows, turning the suburban street into a watercolor painting of gloom. The house felt cold, even though the thermostat was set to 70.
It was the chill of anticipation. They arrived at noon sharp. Jason, wearing a suit that was too tight in the shoulders. Karen, wearing a black dress that looked more appropriate for a funeral. Mr. Vance, the slime-ball lawyer they had hired, carrying a leather briefcase. And a notary public, a nervous-looking woman named Brenda, who clearly just wanted to get paid and go home. They bustled in, shaking off umbrellas, bringing the smell of wet wool and expensive perfume into my sanctuary.
Jason boomed, coming over to where I sat in the armchair. He hugged me. It felt like being embraced by a python. "We brought soup," Karen said, heading to the kitchen. "No," I said, letting my head droop. "Not hungry. Just..." They set up in the dining room. They treated it like a solemn occasion, speaking in hushed tones, but there was a buzzing energy of greed beneath the surface. They were vibrating with it. They were minutes away from the jackpot. "We just want what's best for you, Dad," Jason said, guiding me to the head of the table. He pulled out the chair. "This way, we can handle the bills. You don't have to worry about math or taxes anymore." "Rest," I mumbled, staring at the polished wood of the table. "I'm so tired." "It's the condition, Mr. Sterling," Karen said to the notary, smoothing her skirt with a performative sigh. "It progresses so fast." Mr. Vance opened his briefcase. He spread the documents out on the table. The white pages seemed to glow in the dim light. "Just a few signatures, Elias," Vance said, his voice oily and smooth. He uncapped a heavy, expensive pen and placed it in my hand. "Right here and here." I picked up the pen. My hand trembled violently, a deliberate, chaotic shake. I let the pen hover over the paper. The tip touched the signature line, leaving a small dot of ink. The room held its breath. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. I could hear Karen's shallow breathing. "Wait," I said. My hand froze. "Jason?" asked, tension spiking in his voice. I looked up. I looked at the blank TV screen mounted on the wall of the living room, visible through the archway. "I want to watch TV," I said. Karen let out a sigh, a sound of immense, unrestrained impatience. "Dad, we can watch TV after." "No," I said. My voice changed. I dropped the tremor. I dropped the slur. The word came out hard, like a hammer hitting steel. Jason blinked. I put the pen down. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. "I want to show you something," I said. I pressed the button to cast my screen to the massive 85-inch smart TV, another part of the gift they had installed to keep me pacified. The screen flickered to life. The video started. It was the clip from Tuesday, 3:14 a.m. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the other room, and the rain drumming against the glass. On the screen, giant and high definition, the kitchen was bathed in blue light.
Karen walked into the frame. She looked annoyed. She was wearing her pajamas. She walked to the fridge. She opened it. She took out the milk. She reached into her pocket. She pulled out the vial. Every eye in the dining room was glued to the screen. On the TV, Karen unscrewed the vial. She poured the white powder into the milk. She shook it. She put it back. In the dining room, Jason froze. His face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Karen stood up, knocking her chair over. It clattered against the floor. "This is," she screeches, pointing a shaking finger at the TV. This is fake. It's AI." I didn't answer. I pressed a button on my phone. The next clip played. Jason walking into my study. Jason opening the drawer. Jason taking the Omega watch. Jason looking at the camera and smiling before slipping it into his pocket. "Why?" I asked calmly. I pressed another button. Karen throwing my mail into the trash compactor. Karen spitting in my soup bowl before stirring it and bringing it to me. The silence in the room was shattered by the sound of Mr. Vance snapping his briefcase shut. He sensed the shift in the wind. I put the remote down. I stood up. I didn't shake. I didn't shuffle. I pushed the chair back and stood to my full height of 6'2". I squared my shoulders. The old man vanished. The engineer remained. I looked down at them, at the son I had raised, at the woman he had married, at the vulture circling a body that wasn't dead yet. "The expiration date on your lives was yesterday," I said. My voice was clear, deep, and resonant, filling the room. "We," stammered Jason, backing away. It was supplements, just vitamins." "It was poison," I said. "Arsenic, to be precise." I pulled the folded lab report from my pocket and tossed it onto the table next to the unsigned conservatorship papers. "Attempted murder," I said. I nodded toward the hallway. Frank stepped out from the kitchen where he had been waiting. He wasn't alone. 2 uniformed police officers stepped out with him, their hands resting near their belts.
The notary let out a small squeak of terror and pressed herself against the wall. Jason Sterling, Karen Sterling, Frank announced, his voice booming with the authority of 30 years in the courtroom. He held up a warrant. Karen screamed. She bolted. She tried to run for the back door, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood. But she wasn't fast enough.
One of the officers intercepted her before she reached the archway. He spun her around and cuffed her hands behind her back. She screamed, a raw, animal sound of panic. "Get off me! I didn't do anything! He's crazy!" Jason didn't run. He collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He began to weep, ugly, heaving sobs. "I didn't know it was poison," he sobbed, his voice muffled. "I swear, Dad, I didn't know. She said it was just sedatives. I just wanted the money. We were in debt." I looked at him. My heart broke, but my resolve hardened like concrete setting in a mold. "You wanted the money more than you wanted a father," I said softly. I watched them get dragged out. Karen was still screaming, cursing me, cursing Jason. Jason was limp, dead weight, crying like a child. The neighbors were watching from their windows. I saw the curtains twitching across the street. The shame was public. The ruin was total. Mr. Vance, the lawyer, tried to pick up his briefcase and sneak toward the front door while the police were wrestling Karen. "Sit down," I barked. Vance froze. "Frank has a few questions for you about drafting illegal conservatorship papers based on falsified medical evidence," I said. Vance slumped into his chair, defeated. When the police finally left, taking the circus with them, the house fell silent. Frank stayed for a while, taking statements, organizing the evidence, but eventually he left too. I was alone. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the lonely, terrifying silence of before. It was the silence of peace. It was the silence of a structure that had been stress-tested and had held its ground. I walked into the kitchen. I opened the smart fridge. The light washed over me. I took out a fresh bottle of milk, one I had bought myself this morning from the corner store. I poured a glass. I drank it. It tasted cold, clean, and safe. I looked at the camera lines inside the fridge door, the little black eye that had saved my life. I winked. "Good robot," I whisper. I walked to the window and watched the rain falling on the empty driveway, washing away their tire tracks, washing away the poison. I am alone. I am 74, and I am just getting started.